start turning the taps on, we'll see. It certainly seems like it's either that or, civil war. So maybe that'll motivate them.
So I had just flicked the start recording. So it's your choices as to whether or not
That's
you want
the beginning.
whether you want civil war as the beginning or not. Of this.
God!
Because I can change the switch right now, real quick, and we can not, or you can just roll with it. Because that's it, man. Like, money's the solution to all of it. It's like you either spend it on the right thing or you spend it on the wrong thing, and that's it. Like, that's the name of the game at this point.
Oh, right. Well, I think that I feel like, should I choose to say no, let's cut it? Here's the thing. There's no way we're going to have an honest conversation over the next hour and a half and not talk about the looming prospect of civil war.
Yeah.
And so we may as well just start it there and just to say, like, I'm not advocating for that at all. And there's I think that there are other possibilities.
Yeah.
And one of them is a massive redistribution of wealth from the federal government and corporations that it props up for, to everyday people, and not just in the form of checks, but also obviously in the form of infrastructure and all these other things. That's one thing, which, we should get. But then the other thing is we have to really figure out how to make life not revolve around money.
Yeah.
And I mean that not just in this, like, foofy idealistic way. Yeah. I mean, literally, it's destroying the basis of, like, the cultural fabric and social life.
Yeah.
We are, like, commodifying ourselves, each other, every aspect of our lives, every moment of our lives, right? Turning it into something that is about, exchangeable for money. And so, and it's making people miserable. Mm-hmm. It's making people really, really unpleasant to be around. And the only way, like I can't get out of that individually. You can't get out of that individually, right? And people tried about 60 years ago a massive and impressive wave of getting their friends together and moving to the woods, and that was cool until they basically, like, tore each other apart psychologically. And, it's like, we're not going to get out of it in small groups. Mm-hmm. The only way that we are going to get out of a world which has its values and priorities just turned on its head is collectively. Mm-hmm. And when I say collectively, I mean the people that live in a place together. Mm-hmm. Right? If we're gonna build a world that is worth living in the midst of the 21st century, facing and looking in the eye of the Leviathan of the challenges that are cascading toward us. Mm-hmm. There's that word. We're gonna do it as people in a place together. And so we've got to build a way out. And we've got to build a way out, not just of, and I'm not saying get rid of money. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to build a world where money is not the center of it.
Yeah.
And somehow that is, like, this incredibly radical thought in this world. Yeah. Because it's pushed everything to the margins, right? But so to build a world where care is essentially the word mm-hmm. that I would put there and that others put there, where care is at the center of it. And I think we can do it, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be actually a struggle to do that utterly simple thing. But that's the task that's before us, and it's been before us for generations now, and people have known it for generations, and everyone gets bought off. One generation after another. Uh-huh. I'm putting it simply because some people also get locked up and repressed, right? And there's a lot of other things that happen, but on the whole, these big moments like we're in right now, where it looks like there might be a big, unleashing of the economic taps from up on high, It's still a big if, you know. But those moments are actually moments of great danger, because that's a moment of turning down people's criticism of the systems and making people say, like, well, maybe I can put these histories aside for a little while, right? Maybe I have a future within that, you know, these corporations which have been destroying the conditions for life on the planet and made us all dependent on unhealthy food and, you know, destabilize the ecological systems. Yeah.
Don't you judge my box of Cracker Barrel macaroni.
And I don't, you know, I don't. You know, they have a monopoly effectively on our lives. You know, it's worthless to judge your box of macaroni if you have no other options, which is why we need to quickly and urgently and carefully build other options.
Yeah.
We have to. And so that's like, you know, the thrust of overall the kind of things that I and the people that I'm like honored to work with on all these things. Like that's the orientation. Like let's start where we are and let's try to build a path out.
Yeah.
Because there's no because it's there's something there's a moment of real truth in the cynicism about the politics at the upper levels of things. You know, you're right when you say that it's not going anywhere or it's not going anywhere good.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a historical like fable, or not fable, there's a story that I kind of tell for myself that makes sense out of that anxiety about the moment when the federal government decides to give stuff back. Should I tell it? I should say it.
Let me do your intro.
For sure. What are we talking about? That's how this begins. Great. Okay.
No. Here's the deal, man. I haven't done this for over a month, so for me, I'm just kind of rough riding through, and I appreciate you being the person to come back into this with me, Nick. And that is my guest for episode 36 of the WTF Carbondale podcast, Nick. And I'm always real good about mispronouncing names, so I'm going to try this.
Go for it.
Smaligo?
That's amazing. Because most people, there's like my name like creates dyslexia for people, okay, where like people switch the words around or the letters around for some reason. But you got all of them. You got it. You got it great.
It's the
Smaligo
episode. It's the podcast where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back together to this little place we call home, Carbondale. And I'm real privileged to have Nick on this episode as well, because it's the first in the series of interviews that I'm hoping to get done with everyone who's running for council, Carbondale City Council 2021. And so, yeah, sorry, man, I didn't to cut you off. And
I just want to say thank you for inviting me.
Cycle back.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for thinking of me and putting me as your experiment with this.
Listen, man, at least you're not episode number 1 where it was real rough. Like,
really?
I watch it and I'm like, I'm looking one side of the screen and the guest is looking out the other side of the screen.
I think you're a pro, man. It looks really great.
No, man, I'm glad to see you, mustache glory and all.
It's so weird. I normally, you know, when I'm out, I just have the mask on, and then anybody that sees me, you know, it's like, I don't know, it's not exactly a joke. I got into running, I quit smoking, and I was like, I'm just gonna do something different with my face, you know? And here it is.
Well, it had to have some aerodynamics for the running that you're doing. Now you got to feel the wind cut over your chin and past your ears and downforce. Man.
Yeah,
it's
you know,
great.
Sometimes you just get sick of how you look, and so here it is.
How do you feel not smoking? How has that been?
It's been amazing. I tried to quit smoking for 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I feel extraordinarily grateful for all the things that helped me to both do it and to sustain doing it. I mean, yeah, I like every day, no matter how bad a day I have, you know, I can just be like, but you know, 6 months on that, and I feel great about it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. So I I started smoking when I was like a teenager, and I smoked until I was 22. It was just an awful habit, man, and it is tough to get away from.
Look, COVID really helped with it, because so much of my like kind of movement through the town, and one of the positives of smoking was always like the ability to have kind of spontaneous conversations with people, or to take a break from whatever you're doing, and just like having the kind of like, COVID broke a lot of habits, which, on a lot of different levels, but that is one of the positive things, at least for me personally, to come out of it, it's, I don't know. We don't talk about
realignment of priorities, man. That's, I mean, it has snapped everybody everywhere into a particular way that they weren't necessarily ready or like knew that they were going to go into. Like we have missed as a global society this concept of shared experience. The fragmentation of existence in so many different ways, from physical nearness, right, to modern media, has pushed us into our separate worlds. And this has brought us all into one very close reality in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. I think, that's well,
there's an exception to that.
No, just because I think it's a one, yes, right? Experience is fragmenting, right? There isn't, for a long time, it was clear that there was less and less of a kind of center or some agreed upon basis called reality, that everyone was engaged with the same thing. And then, COVID really like became that, but then also very quickly, you realize there are very different realities going on within that. But I mean, as a early on in it, people were talking about it as a kind of like something analogous to the experience of climate change, but on a compressed time scale or something, or that this was like practice for what that was going to be. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I do think that this ability to try to conceive what there's a philosopher that calls them like hyper objects, right? These things that are real things, but that are just so extended in space and time that you can't just quite grasp them, and they exist like not here, not there, but between us and by us and stuff like that. We're in an epoch in which those things are. There's a lot of those, and there's going to be more of them, and we have to figure out how actually to live in relation to these. I mean, I'm not particularly committed to that word, but these hyper objects, whatever.
No, I mean that's something that people don't get. I mean, that's like when we talk about wealth inequality and people can't grasp even $1 billion, right? If people can't grasp $1 billion, how do we expect people to grasp the concept of climate change, which is the result of something much larger than just $1 billion?
Yeah. And partly, the thing is with all of those, right, is to try and trying to figure out how to like teach or make effective these big concepts, right, is you have to break it into something that's like really present in people's immediate experience, you know? And that's why, like, people like attach to things like, recycling or turning the lights off, and these really clear things, and little kids especially, right, attached to those things. And that's good, right? But also, we all, people that are trying to really think the whole thing and trying to find a way out, we have to also recognize the structures and the larger forces here, rather than the individual actions. I feel like we're getting like way into details on things, and I don't know. You know how to do this though.
No, dude. I mean, this is just it. You let people be themselves and I'm just kind of silly in the midst of it.
Okay.
Where, I mean, how did you get introduced to Carbondale? Are you originally from here? And
Oh,
did you move
no.
here like for college? Are you
Yeah.
high school?
I thought we knew each other
or-
better than that.
Huh?
No, I thought you knew. I thought,
I mean, I may, but like also,
but not. But there's other people talking. Yeah, or they're listening. Yeah, I came down here in 2008 to do graduate school in philosophy.
Yeah.
I grew up in Connecticut. I had lived in a bunch of other places. I lived in Chicago, Berlin, New York, and like traveled around, being in one place for like a year or two at a time, and then came here to do grad school, and planned on just staying for a master's.
Yeah.
I
got my PhD in life. No,
yeah, yeah. And then I planned on kind of moving on, and but I met a lot of really great people here, and I got really like into the DIY scene, the house shows, and the punk scene, and I it was just unlike any other place I'd ever been. I'd been in like I grew up in a suburb of in a Connecticut suburb, and then I'd lived in big cities. But something about this town and the culture that I found, particularly the DIY scenes, where it was like, people who, and when I got here, there were a number of people who had like consciously decided we're gonna stay and we're gonna make this town awesome, And I remember just like being really struck by that idea that people would choose to stay in a place like this, because my kind of arrogance coming in was like, there's a university, and so I was really impressed by people's like kind of loyalty to the place. A number of those people ended up leaving and going to places like Portland and stuff, but they put in time really trying to build something up. And then also I remember being really impressed in my like early years of here do you remember like critical mass that people would do, which was like every week people would have this big bike riding party throughout the town, and you'd block traffic, and if there was like a protest or something, then that would go to a protest, and this kind of like infusion of like a DIY music culture with a kind of political sensibility, and it just like made this town like a really exciting place for me. And I met a lot of people that I really, really cherished. And so when I finished my master's degree, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to New York City or something. And I just got this like deep, deep pit in my stomach at the idea of, because I had already like, met people and said goodbye in a bunch of other places. And the idea of just like picking up and leaving again, I just didn't want to do it. And then also I was in the philosophy program. They were like, we want you to stay for a PhD. And so I decided to stay. I mean, I guess there's like another element to all of this, like thinking about staying here. At that time, I was like getting involved in the effort to stop fracking here, And I was meeting a lot of people who were like had this deep, deep commitment to this region. And that was also something that I had really never like experienced or seen, and was really impressed by it. And was working with different groups trying to raise awareness and do trainings around fracking. And I had this weird experience where I was trying to like recruit other grad students and people involved with the university to try to be involved in like direct action and stuff against fracking. And I found this weird phenomenon that I had recognized in myself, like when I first got here, which was that people felt like they didn't want, like they were against fracking and they thought it was bad for all the right reasons. But then they're like, but I don't want to get involved because it doesn't feel like it's my fight, because I'm only here for a few years. And that really got me thinking about a kind of moral problem that we're facing with regard to like ecology, because I think that experience that people have when they come in here, what I had when I was coming in here, this idea that I'm just passing through this place. And then, my life doesn't start until I get to this next place or something. And so then the place that I'm in isn't worth fighting for. Or it's like the people who have been here their whole lives whose job it is to fight for it. And I'm just, moving through. And it occurred to me that that's like a general condition, because the economy is just like pulling everybody everywhere. And most people are only where they are until another job comes along or something like that. And so that means that a lot of people who feel a deep sense of ecological responsibility are also kind of denying themselves what it takes to really fight for the place that they're in, because if the world is gonna be saved, which is a weird phrase, but like if we're gonna build the kind of world we need, we're gonna build it place by place, and we're gonna defend it place by place. And so, in order to do that, I think we have to. Or I made a decision for myself that I wanted to like dig in, and I didn't want to be a transient person. I wanted to be a person that was rooted somewhere, and I fell in love with here. And it's been very sad, actually, to see a lot of people that I care about, and also a lot of the the spontaneity and vibrancy of the kind of culture fall away. Not just during COVID. I mean, that's been very sad, but even prior to that, and that's part of, I guess, something that's been motivating me for a long time now. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
I try to make sense.
You have seen a particular part of the soul and spirit of Carbondale.
Yeah.
And like pursued that along with, a much bigger purpose in actually trying to like do some of the things that are going to add up to a greater collection of actions that save a planet.
That's that. I mean, yeah, that's the grandiose vision of it. I think, yeah, when we think about all these things, I mean, all of this is just chalked up to that old bumper sticker cliche, right? Think globally, act locally, but which is, yes, let's do that, and then inverse it too, because maybe part of the problem with that, or the limitation of that, is like we also have to think locally, meaning we have to dive really into the specificity of the place that we're in, and I guess it's worth mentioning the Carbondale Spring, because it was like an exercise in this for me, and I can get into what it is, but part of the setup is, whereas a lot of politics or radical politics or leftist politics, one of the shortcomings.
You are the radical left. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I guess I am. Although what that means, ethically, I'm on the side of that. All of these concepts, though, get twisted around, and I'd much rather I like to try to talk about things and about and not about political ideologies, although I will if people want.
And I also want to I'm going to tune myself down now, because I felt like I have been some sort of like man-cow morning show host for the first 25 minutes of this podcast.
Really?
I don't know why this new personality was my way to ease back into.
We're 25 minutes in already?
Yeah, we're 25 minutes in, dude. This may run an hour and a half. I don't care. This is going to be one of those
No, we got so much stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
Nathan.
yeah, we do. And here's the deal, man. I have a feeling that all the council folks, for the most part, are going to have a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. And I'm just going to run out the clock on these. I'm not just going to be like, all right, cool. Well, we're at like an hour and 5 minutes. We need to. Because that's my usual time frame. Like if somebody wants to talk for 2 hours, I'm just gonna let it ride.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Off track, but back.
It's fine. It's fine. So like it's one thing to say, okay, there's capitalism is destroying the planet, which I think is true.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to agree with me on that. Something's destroying the planet.
Yeah.
It is involved.
It's not Godzilla maybe and King Kong. It's not.
Sorry. Something is destroying the life systems on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But what's required, I think, for people that want to try to take responsibility for the places that they're in, and I think if we want to engage with those macro level things, we have to start taking responsibility for the place that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And that involves trying to understand how those processes are happening right here and around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say we have to think locally too, right? It's not like we can just have some abstract analysis. Capitalism does this, therefore I act locally on that. I mean, everything is very nuanced, The story of how things developed here in this place is fascinating. I mean, we live in a really, really unique place, or maybe every place is utterly unique, and I've just for some reason gotten obsessed with the history of here, But I think we need to be able to tell a story to ourselves about how this town and this region came to be, and how the different kind of challenges and crises of our epochs emerged and developed here individually, and how the struggles that of the past emerged and developed here, So when I think about just to make this more concrete, this area has been referred to as like an internal colony, right? A resource extraction zone, and within that, Carbondale played this really unique role as the kind of connection to the outside world for much of its history because of the railroad, and that was the first kind of phase of the history here, and then I'm not going to try to tell a whole story, although I want to kind of do a podcast devoted to that.
Just take 5 minutes.
But here's the thing: this whole region, after the First World War, when a lot of the coal mines had already started to shut down around that point, but there were also intense labor strikes. This region posed a serious problem to Springfield. It was a difficult region to govern. And after the Second World War, my view of the history here is that the building up of the university was a kind of civilizing project. was perceived that way and sold that way too by Delight Morris and people on his side and on his team. Particularly, I'm thinking of this guy named Baker Brownell, who wrote this amazing book called The Other Illinois, which is my favorite book about the region. And it's just he's traveling around to all these small towns. He's kind of idealizing it, talking about how it's kind of rugged, basic, democratic impulse, and people kind of salt of the earth people who are, if only they just had some resources or some development because these industries have shut down. And then the book ends with as a pitch basically for Delight Morris's college, which is distributed throughout the whole region. And I know people at the university, or some people understand this, but I don't know if everybody understands just how unique Delight Morris's vision was.
Yeah.
There were not universities like this one at that time. And this guy Baker Brownell was a philosopher and an educator, and he developed this thing called the Division of Area Services, where professors and people, experts from the university would go and conduct these really long discussions with people in small towns all around here, basically doing this deep participatory democracy about how they wanted their towns to develop, It was a really unique program for the times, like radical,
Yeah.
But that, along with a lot of other things, was like totally cut off after the 1970 riots. And whatever. There's a lot to say about the whole trajectory of the story, but the long point that I'm trying to make here is that Carbondale, as we know it, was founded on a set of very, very bold and unorthodox ideas about what education was. Mm-hmm. That's what grew this from a town of a few thousand people with a 3,000 person teachers college or college to a town with 23,000 students in it, over the course of a decade and a half. And it set the condition for a place that became a mecca for counterculture. This place used to be called the Athens of Egypt. It was like something that I always liked about it, Mm-hmm. But like a place where there was all of this life and vibrancy, and and I think we've seen the long, there was like a long, steady decline of that, and then we've seen it kind of drop off a cliff now. And so what my wager is, what I think the wager of the Carbondale Spring broadly, is that we need an equally bold set of ideas, something that is equally just like out of left field, in order to sustain the town that drew all of us who are alive here today in, and we can't be afraid to put forward a kind of radical vision of what a university town can be. And I think if we do that, and especially if we focus on the city, then we'll make a place that people want to move to and stay in. And that's all very abstract. But if we're talking more concretely about what kind of place I think we need to build, we have to be really honest about the fact that like this is a time of deep crisis, and not just ecologically, right? Socially, economically, to just name three. Spiritually, you could also say. And so I think that as a kind of overarching vision, what I'd suggest is that we're trying to build a space of refuge here, a place where people can come to and feel like they're escaping a world that is increasingly, harsh, intense, potentially like, politically volatile, and surveilled, where life feels more and more narrowed down to survival, to try to create a space where it feels like, life is happening. And I think that a town of this size and a place like this laid out like this is the kind of place where you could build oases like that. And when I think like part of the reason, not only do I think that it's just like a good idea and the kind of place I want to live, but I think there's also this like weird kind of moral imperative that we've got in this era that is motivated by climate change. Because I think about like places like the worst example is a place like Paradise, California, a place that's just wiped off the map by a fire. But anybody that thinks about and that understands what's coming and what's here, knows that's going to keep happening. People are going to lose everything. People on the coasts, maybe even us, And I think, we have good reason to believe that we're going to be relatively isolated from or insulated from some of these effects, but we don't know. And so I think like the moral imperative of the time is that everybody needs to start building the kinds of places where they would want to land should they lose everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I have that.
I just have to ask.
Yeah, no, yeah. this has been the idea for, in my mind, that's another part of this project. That's another part of like building these, little things that catch people. So, for me, the web, I understand how to weave because, dude, I can't, I have no capacity to grow anything. I have no trade with my hands. Like, I'm not a skillful person in any way, shape, or form. I'm worthless, but I can build communication networks.
I think you're
space.
selling yourself short there. but no, but what you're doing is great. I mean, to create and to celebrate a place, a humble place, is great. And to there are brilliant and wonderful people that live here. And it's actually so sad because this is also a place of very intense kind of like social ruts and cliques. And I don't know, I'm not on social media, and I realize that that's where a lot of like reality happens now. But I'm very happy that I'm not on it. But it's like a place of my impression is that it's a place of the wrong kind. It's not it's not a place of intimate connection. And so what you're creating is the capacity for a bit more intimacy, and I think that that's really wonderful.
Well, and casting a net too. So when you go to ask these people to look at Carbondale as a place that they would land when they're faced with an imminent threat from climate change, right? Yeah. They themselves become a climate refugee. Now, we are presenting ourselves to folks. Hey, like, we are a place you can come to. Like, we've got to be willing to reach out. To like when these things happen. It is not an easy conversation to have. It's not an easy conversation to go to people and say, everything has just been upended in your life, but we have a community here that we would like you to come be part of.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, the only thing that I want to say is because I also know that there are people that have thoughts very similar to the ones that we're having, but they have them with dollar signs in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, important that we like see that and draw those lines and say like that's actually a struggle for that's the battle of the future. And to say very clearly that it is despicable to attempt to capitalize upon the tragedies that other people befall or are going through. That isn't the premise of welcoming people in, and that we have to have like a radical hospitality because as I said, the ethical, the moral imperative here is imagine you lose everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to show up at a gated community with, even if it's gated with a Bucky dome or something like that? So throwback to a old intervention, but a gated community where they're like, well, we've got this, walled ecotopia, and sorry, it's only if you've got, where there are conditions put on hospitality, right? That's not hospitality. And so we have to, and so right now, here and really everywhere, we're not doing so good in that, right? Because the most likely thing is that the cultural patterns that we are currently enacting are going to be the ways that we act, as the crisis intensified, only worse. And those are patterns of, exclusion, exploitation. I'll give an example, starting, I guess it was last year, 2 years ago, there was a big influx of people from Cairo because the pyramid housing complex down there was destroyed. They spent however many millions of dollars demolishing it rather than fixing it up because, there's a big port investment down there and they're clearing the way for some kind of weird Midwest gentrification or something, which, who knows, that's a whole other topic. But there were all these displaced people who moved into Carbondale, and point one, they had vouchers. And so people who were renters in Carbondale started getting kicked out of their houses by landlords who were raising the rent because the vouchers were more than what they were getting. So they were raising the rent so that they could get a voucher person from Cairo in there. Number one, right? So displacing people here, and that there is the logic of gentrification, right? Even if in this case it's just because it's federally subsidized vouchers. But then too, there wasn't, to my knowledge, any real effort to like welcome these folks and kind of acknowledge their experience and how painful it must be to have come out of like really neglected housing projects for a long time and then be thrown into another place where and the reason I say that and the reason that come up is because I've had conversations with different people, particularly in the Northeast side where I live, where people have noticed that folks from Cairo kind of get scapegoated for different for crime, violent crime or something like that. But then the other question that other people have mentioned is like, well, did we or was there any effort really to like welcome them and to integrate people into the networks of support that people have. And so I think that's like a first thing, right? Like that's the way that right now we're dealing with refugees, which is this like a laissez-faire approach. Some landlords make some bucks off of them, and then people are just kind of left to their own devices. What would it look like to take a more proactive approach to that and say like we genuinely want to welcome you here, and we genuinely want to treat you with and to hear about your story and to share your story and to build those relationships. And it's like this is not easy stuff, and this is just one little sliver of experience, because taking that attitude where we're putting care for one another at the center is going to be a big that catalyze a lot of change in a lot of different quarters.
When did the concept of care in your life really take hold as kind of a guiding light?
In my life personally, or in terms of this, like, as a concept of such political importance? That's such an interesting question. I mean, I think I've always been somebody who has had a deep sense of like justice and of right and wrong, and I credit my mom for that. Just because she was somebody who always would like both like empathize and sympathize with people, and also would think very critically. And like and so just when I was younger, we would I feel like my basic kind of trajectory of my thinking was influenced by her. But then the notion that we broadly, like normal people, had the ability to transform the world in a meaningful way, right, beyond voting for this or that person, and just kind of hoping something happens. But the idea that there is actually action and agency that can be collectively asserted, that was for me the long consequence of my experience with the Occupy movement, which was, 1,000 different things. And I wrote a book about it if you want to read. And I agree with like maybe, half of the things that are in that book now.
Okay, I don't want to cut off too good, but that itself is such a question that I have it fits like evolution for you off of these experiences. Like, what has that felt like? Because I mean, you, especially having, a deep understanding, with your philosophy background of just what it is to think and what it is to change and grow your mind. How has that evolution been, both in long chunks and in short chunks?
How has trying to get a sense of what you're asking me.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, are you asking just like what it's like to kind of try to like think from these experiences, or
yeah? I mean, you're talking about having written a book, and then you're like, about half of that is what I agree.
Oh yeah.
With. Now it's like you change in all
Yeah,
sorts
I've
of
changed
different
a lot.
intervals and ways.
I mean, I so when I was in my, like, before Occupy, I'll just say, because that was really a changing point in my life. I was really interested in like critical theory and philosophy, political philosophy and stuff. But it was all just like, yeah, we can criticize things, but there was no kind of like world of practice for me. I was a little involved with the union, in the graduate student union in the run up to the 2011 strike, which was around the same time as Occupy, and that was interesting, a very interesting experience. But at a certain point, like through Occupy and then through subsequent experiences, I guess I realized, I remember it quite clearly, that I was having better conversations about justice and these like broad philosophical things that I was in graduate school to discuss. I was having better conversations about those on the streets of St. Louis with people in Occupy, where I felt like all of a sudden these words have meaning, and that has been a thread that I've followed for quite a long time, and that is the idea that this isn't an anti-intellectual or anti-academic thing, but that the place where these vital and important concepts really hit the ground is the place where they change and they grow, and that's always at the kind of vanguard of thought is people who are actually engaged in struggling to transform the world. Another way to say that is like a pragmatist saying, or what could be a pragmatist saying is like, if you want to understand how something works, try to break it. And then you'll really see it's functioning, and so for me, like, Occupy was one massive experience, but then also the Ferguson uprising was, I was a participant in that and met a ton of people and was involved in an occupation through that with people from Ferguson, and that was a moment that like just exploded my understanding of the world, because again, I'd taken a philosophy of race class. I had understood the history of the concept of race and all of these social constructions and these other things, but there was much. There were serious and real lessons about like who I am and what it means to have been constructed as white and what that means in our experiences. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe I lost the question that you're asking, but ultimate, and let's bring it all the way up here. The Carbondale Spring, which we still haven't defined or talked about, was just like the thing that I'm here to talk about, probably. It's changed me. I'm just a different person than I was 2 years ago. My politics are different. My sense of what's possible is different. But I'm happier, partly because it was a vehicle for me to kind of take what felt like a kind of last step out of the realm of like, ideology where I'm just like, I want to be right about the thing. I want to get it all right and have a nice conceptual, just be right, and it moved me, or the people that am involved with, like it just feels so much more grounded, where we're not we have like, here are the things that we want to do, right? And I'll just say these things because this is the program of the Carbondale Spring. We want to reduce the Carbondale police budget by half, which is to say we want to right size the Carbondale police. I'll say more about that. We want to take that money, or see that money redirected into food autonomy, right? Building a food safety net of nutritious, organic food grown in the city, and we want to see the city pay people to do it because it's important, just as important as anything else that the city pays for. We want food grown here. And then the second is a team of care workers, right? We want people who are trained with trauma-informed mental health, emergency crisis intervention, to be able to respond to the many crises that you don't actually need a police officer for, but you do need somebody who has a different set of training and who doesn't have a gun to get in there. And that's one aspect of it, but we want a team of care workers, which would reduce the burden on the current police department. And then we also want renewable energy fund. We want to see solar, and not just solar, but other forms of autonomous energy production, and also forms of collective reduction of our energy needs in order to become less dependent upon fossil fuels here in this town. And then finally, we want a cooperative business fund, or we're building a cooperative business fund to transition businesses that are functional but up for sale, or the owner's going to retire and there's not capital investment into the town, to give those businesses over to their workers. And also to start new businesses that are worker owned, right? So that we are building jobs, but also educating people in living in or creating democratic workplaces. That, I think, is a strategy, one, to solve that problem of what's called business succession, but also to create literally the best place in the country to work. If this town is filled with worker-owned cooperatives, where like the quality of all of these things, right? The happiness quotient goes up, in all of these cases. But if we have like a whole network of worker cooperatives that are servicing our anchor institutions, this is going to be an awesome place to live and work. And so the aim of the Carbondale Spring is partly, drawing back on some of the things that I mentioned earlier. It's like Carbondale is in an identity crisis of sorts, where, it was the kind of the Athens of Egypt, or some, better said, it was like the central point within a mining region. And then it was the, university town that had this like wacky counterculture. There's probably a lot more to say about it. But in any case, for the last decade or so, like, things have just been floundering. That's motivated in large part by the fact that the student population's dropped by about 9,000 people, and there's a million things to say about that, but it's changed the situation. It's changed the town. And what we're trying to say is we don't need to just pretend that situation's going to reverse. But there's a way that we can turn a blessing into a curse. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But maybe I will in the future. I mean for that to rhyme. And because the student population has dropped so much, we estimate that the actual population of the town is around 20,000, because, when you look on those signs, the 26,000, that includes most of the students. And a lot of people don't know that. And I didn't know that when I first came here. but it does include most of the students. And so we are at or below 20,000, and that means that we have double the police of the national average, which is not counting the full staffed police department on SIU. If you count them, we have triple the police of the national average. As a city, we pay double to sustain a double-sized police force. And so that's why we say we can right size the police. We can reduce their numbers from 60 plus officers to around 30 plus officers. And we should do that urgently while we still have the money, so that we can redirect it and make this place the best place to live and work for hundreds of miles, well, it already is that, but for thousands of miles potentially, right? We could really, if we take on this commitment and say we want to put at the forefront of our local politics the macro challenges of our time, climate change, racial justice, the need to overcome a punitive approach to social problems, which is related to racial justice, but not just that, right? It's about a whole philosophy of that undergirds mass incarceration, and once again transforming this place into a kind of hotbed of experimentation, but pulling together all of these things, all of these great ideas about how to live ecologically and how to live compassionately, to just actually say, this is the kind of city we want to build. Let's do it. Why would we not do that? And so the Carbondale Spring is just it's like a skeleton of that. It's just like, we think these 4 things step in this direction, and let's do that. Let's make that commitment as a city. And then, but me and everybody else involved, we're like open to more things. We could do more. That'd be awesome. And also tweaking each of those. So each of those things we have like worked to start to develop so far, some more than others. And it's been, over the last 2 years, like just an incredible experience, which I think is how I started talking about this, that, I've changed through it. And I feel like, I feel happier and more hopeful, frankly. And I think other people involved do too. So
Good.
Am I doing good?
Dude, here's the deal. I have been a god awful host. Usually
this time?
Huh?
I think you're doing fine, but
hey, awesome, cool.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just really self-conscious after not doing this for a little while, and I felt like I've been a little too goofy and not like absorbent enough when I'm doing my chime-ins of the gravity of what you're sharing, man. Because this is exactly what makes Carbondale the place that it is, right? Mm-hmm. I'm from here, but that shouldn't like dictate any sort of like validity in what I have to say, because plenty often places are ran to the ground by people that are from there, right? Yeah. The key to this place is that the world comes to it, right? That's always my little sales pitch. I don't know how many years ago I worked it up, probably like 6 or 7. And I'm sure plenty of people said it before me, but I felt like I arrived at it in my own unique conclusion. Okay. Yeah. No. And just that, it's a place where you don't have to go to the world comes to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that can both, lift up the folks that are here now, be inviting to folks that will at some point in time in the future be here, and just be like a guiding, like, this is how you should welcome folks to your community. Like, here's a standard of what it is to just be in existence. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't think you're asking much beyond that, right? Of like, just we want to live okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely it, right? I want everyone to live okay. I also think that we can't build the world that we really need without a real deep kind of reckoning with the enormity of the challenges that we face and the histories that we are swept up in. I said I would come back to something from the very beginning, and that was my skepticism about the moment when the federal government turns on the economic tap. It's an interesting story, because the last real great time that happened was with the War on Poverty, which was a Johnson administration thing. And then it actually really affected Carbondale, though, because Carbondale was selected as one of about a dozen or so so-called model cities. And the story that I had heard about this is basically that was because of somebody who's involved with that program stepped into the northeast side of Carbondale. And this was in the mid to late 60s. I think it was probably 67 that they were awarded the grant. And then it started coming in 69. But so a local historian, Gregory Carter, wrote a really interesting master's thesis about the northeast side of Carbondale, likened it to a concentration camp, in the kind of technical sense, where it was a place where people were exposed to the direct violence of the state unmediated by rights, and it functioned as a kind of internal sundown town where black people were not allowed out after dark without being exposed to just straight police violence, you know. And then infrastructurally, it was a disaster. There were no paved roads, no street lights, very little indoor plumbing or spotty indoor plumbing, and so Carbondale was chosen as one of the sites of this massive investment of model cities money, and over the course of about 5 years, I think about $5 or $6 million was directed federally into the northeast side to perform the basic infrastructure of the 20th century, which had been built in 3/4 of the town, I should say. That the very construction of the infrastructure of the town utilized race as a category. Basically, they just only developed 3/4 of the town, and this one, a lot of the model cities money was actually resisted by groups like the Black Panthers, because what they saw was that this money was coming in to places specifically where the Panthers were organizing around the country, and that was potentially part of why Carbondale was selected, because even though it's a small town, there's a Black Panther chapter here, and the Panthers were organizing with local churches, with store owners, doing a free breakfast program, eventually doing a free medical clinic. They started the first food co-op in Carbondale, the Panthers, working with local farmers, getting fresh produce and meat for the Black community. They were doing tremendous things. And so this model cities money came in and started to basically try to do the things that the Panthers were doing, but without the politics, right? And then here, as was the case across many other places, where there was all of this money coming in to kind of recuperate what the radicals were doing. And then with the other hand of the state, I guess I got my left hand of my state and my right hand of the state, the other hand of the state, they're like shooting up Panther houses and trapping them and murdering them and things like that. And that also happened here, right? In November 1970, the Panther House was shot up with, I guess there was 9 different police departments all converged there. And from local police departments all converged there. I'm sure people have seen 778 Bullets, but it's a great 15-minute documentary about this history. But I'm kind of putting it into the wider context here, that it's at the moment where there's all of this money pouring in to kind of do the things that the Panthers were trying to do. And so you might say, well, look, they're winning. But that also came with the direct repression of those people who had created the crisis that the federal government was responding to. And so that's the money that built the Irma Hayes Center, which you're on the board of, we're on the board of.
No longer on the board of.
Yeah, but
okay.
the thing is that building was completed in 1973, and that Model Cities money ended in 1974. And so the moment the thing was completed, the funds were cut off, right? And what's really interesting, there's this fascinating book by a Harvard professor called From the War on Poverty to Mass Incarceration, in which what she argues is this moment of this huge federal give back, which cloaked the repression of the radical movement and decapitation of the radical movement, actually built up the infrastructure that, as soon as the political wind shifted, was utilized to build up the system of mass incarceration. Because along with the war on poverty, there was also this crackdown on crime, and the condition for getting all of this money was also the condition of getting more and more documentation and police and things like this. Like more, and so the friendly infrastructure of the state ended up building up the capacity for the state to turn against those very communities in a new way, with the war on drugs and what eventually turned into the construction of the largest prison system in the history of the world, which we have now. It's a long story, and I apologize for that, but it's a cautionary tale for me, because if we're really, really serious about transformation, whatever we want to call it, transformational change, addressing the root problems, we have to go into these moments of transition with open eyes. We can't afford to go into them naively. And so when the US government starts giving back money, right, nobody can afford to be naive about that. This is, one, they're facing an enormous threat. They are afraid of people, and 2020 is the year of that, and
afraid of everybody from everywhere for all sorts of different reasons.
But just
fear
between
thy
the
neighbor. That's what it says in the Bible. Right?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oof, man.
But between the intensity and enormous scope of the uprising that followed the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, to the stomach churning events at the Capitol on January 6th. I guess that wasn't 2020, but it ended a little late. It's like things are. We live in times that are deeply unstable, and people are gonna act out, and people are gonna fight back, and things it's understandable that there would be an attempt to utilize money to calm the situation down.
A pacifier.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is we can't be naive about the interests that will likely be intended to serve, which is to say, corporations are afraid that, insurrection isn't really good for business, and so they're gonna maybe green light, maybe allow for some kind of givebacks or something like that. But that is in order to maintain the imbalance of power, So there's a big difference between redistribution of wealth in order to transform the relations of power, and redistribution of wealth in order to maintain the relations of power. And that's, I guess, the simplest way. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to that, but that's the contrast here.
Yeah.
So again, and to bring it back home, I think that if we're gonna change the relations of power, that's not something that's going to be built from above. There's not the Biden or whatever administration anywhere isn't going to do that. That's going to happen right here.
Yeah.
Right? Right here is where we are going to change the relations of power in our everyday lives. And where we're going to unearth the histories that have constructed the world as we experience it. And I think one of the things that's happening that I'm very excited about, just very recently, some of my friends involved with the Carbondale Spring, Marilyn Tipton in particular, who's on the Food Autonomy Board, met with the Parks District to start the process of doing a memorial for the Koppers plant, or for the victims of the Koppers plant, in Addicks Park. And I'm sure it's still in development, but they've okayed the idea of a memorial there. And for people that don't know, I mean, this is like a huge part of the history of like shaping the economic life and the cultural and the racial dynamics of Carbondale was this intensely polluting tie plant on the northeast side. And just, if you look around town and see what are the things that are the historical markers, I mean, you get a pretty surface vision of things. And so this would be an opportunity to create something that actually unearths and becomes a stumbling stone into a more critical version of the history of this place. And so, yeah, again, I think that's the condition of us having an actual engaging in any actual transformation is letting the truth bubble up first.
I watched Killer Mike grill John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock maybe a couple weeks before the Georgia election.
Mm-hmm.
And like he was questioning Ossoff on cannabis legislation and like how to actually provide access to the modern legal market to the people that risked everything to build the market that exists now in the traditional trade.
Yeah.
Right, and Ossoff was just like, well, I'll listen more on that. I'll read up on it and that type of stuff. He was like, you need to tell the whole story.
Yeah,
that's it. You need,
totally, and we're seeing it now
story.
with the legalization, thing here too. And it's like, yeah, it's gut wrenching to see,
that applies to everything. It's like, you want to understand like what you need to be doing. You can't just tell 25% of a story, 50% of a story, and be like, okay, cool, we have enough to go off of. This is how we can fix something. It's like it has to be full on everything. Like, this is how we got here.
Yeah,
I think the phrase
there's so much
markers.
resistance to that. I mean, there's so much resistance to history, and I mean. Going back, actually, I mean, I really empathize with that resistance because I was somebody that grew up with no sense of history at all. Mm-hmm. And in fact, was actively like hostile to the idea that what happened in the past might have any bearing on what's reasonable or right now. Like that's ridiculous. It was literally the attitude that I had as like, a teenager or something. And that, I had some really good teachers first, but more importantly, like, because I wasn't always really receptive or like understood those teachers or thought I knew everything, but like I had encounters with movements, right? With things and the fact that there, the real history of this country is, I mean, things are written in books and stuff, but also, things are like passed down, and movements have histories of their own that then when you look into or try to understand, like, what was that? Why did that happen? Then you kind of get this whole other lens on the world. And I guess I've been like a student of that phenomenon. But well, I don't remember where we were. I'm sorry.
We were never anywhere, and we were always everywhere.
How long have we been here? There's so much stuff I want to talk about. I feel like I've just kind of, you know, riffed on things without any intention, but I guess that was kind of the point.
Does it feel different than radio and live broadcast, and feeling like you've got like an A and a B that you got to get through in two?
You know, I guess what feels different is I'm me here, you know, or I'm trying to be me. Trying to be me. The radio show I do, I mean, I think also, the camera or whatever, the radio show, I can just feel like I'm like
a voice
thinking about whatever. It's very nice to have other people. We're talking about things, but in this case, I'm just like monologuing without, you're not pushing back. You're just letting me go. So,
yeah.
Great. I guess there's so many things I want to say. I think a lot of the things I don't know, do you want to talk? Can I ask you questions or?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, you can.
Okay.
I had thought about like how I was going to do mine of this. If like part of it was just gonna be like, if part of it was just gonna be me like letting people ask me some questions, and I take up 5 or 10 minutes of people that want to ask me questions, if that's a thing, and then poof, there I've got something, and I've had to like have an earnest exchange with everybody. I think that would be an interesting way to frame all this. I don't know, man. It's all very experimental to me. Is what it feels like. I've never actually done anything like this before. I've always conceptualized, but never like made it work. And now, episode 36, it's wild.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I want to just like, I don't know, I guess I want to talk about the food autonomy project, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's been, for me, I mean, I don't know where I would have been throughout COVID if we hadn't done that in the first few months. I mean, you know what I feel like? I feel like a lot of people went through like a really intense depression with COVID. I feel like mine, I still went through it, but it was delayed because I had the food autonomy project to work on for like the first 6 months of it. And it's just really, really exciting. I mean, I mentioned all of these different aspects of the Carbondale Spring, but that was the one that I had decided, I wanted to like work a lot on with the other people that were already working on it. And then other people have, are focused on other areas. But we basically, when COVID started, we were able to get a grant from Peter Gregory, who I'll just say his name out. He's a local philanthropist and was very, very kind and believed enough in the project to give us like startup money to try this idea out, And we worked with people with Women for Change and with Addicts Community Services, and built beautiful gardens and paid people to work in them during COVID, and paid people to grow food for their neighbors. And it was hard work, and but it was this kind of intense stretch of time where, I mean, one was one of the only kind of like COVID safe collective activities you could imagine at those early points, where we could work outside together and stuff. But it felt like, all right, we're doing it. We're trying to build. We've got resources to try to build the town that we want. and we're focused on the northeast side. But this year we want to expand at least into one other kind of quadrant of the town. And there's just something so fulfilling about building. You know, a garden is like, you know, there's a reason that the myth of Eden, you know, is a garden. You know, because there can be a space of community, a space of beauty, a space of utility. There's a space of education, right? They're just these really potent spaces that once you kind of fall in love with one, then you're like, well, why would we just not have these everywhere? Why do we live without these? What is a lawn? You know, who came up with that idea? Interesting story. It's actually the roots of it was like a way of demonstrating how little you needed to grow food. You know, it's like this kind of colonial project being like, I can just afford to cut this land down and not grow anything, and that's how rich I am, or something. And I mean, this is insane. Like, yeah, we should be growing food everywhere, and we should people shouldn't be left to their own devices doing it. We should be sharing knowledge about how to do it. We should organize our lives around sharing knowledge about how to do that. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
You know? And it shouldn't just be vegetables. Like, we built a dozen chicken coops.
Yeah, dude.
And that was just this like crazy project, which like, I mean, I guess I'll take credit for like just kind of thinking it up, like, oh, I guess we could just build 12 chicken coops and give them away to people. I thought we wanted 15.
Yeah.
But then the act of actually doing it was super intense, and we did that over the course of like 7 weeks. And there was a lot of help, and there was a ton of people that were just like, that's a crazy and good idea. Let's do that. The people over at Little River Research and Design let us mass produce chicken coops in their factory. I mean, what kind of a town is this? where I mean, it makes my heart like explode that like people were, that we live in a place where people's like wealth, skills, time, ingenuity, creativity can be like mobilized in that way that has nothing to do with making money at all. Right? Like, I'll tell you the worst thing about the world with money at the center of it, you know, is this insane myth that is contradicted by every moment of our experience that well, if, you know, that money is what motivates people to act. Like, you have to do so much damage to a human being to make money the motivator of their actions. And you can do that damage. I mean, that's what becoming an adult is in this crazy place, you know? But you really, really have to take away you have to crush people's spirit in order to make money the motivator of their actions. And I don't blame people that have had their spirits crushed. That's not their fault.
Yeah.
But the job of everyone that's still got a connection to that is to rapidly create the conditions where that's no longer the case. And when you have a moment where people are reduced or are relieved from the stresses that money puts on them, then you can get this flowering of creativity and collective ingenuity. And that's what, you know, for me, I was on unemployment during that time, you know, that's what I did with my unemployment time. And there were a number of other people in similar situations. And so anyway,
people have too much of a misnomer on the concept that not working for any sort of wage is by somehow indicative of laziness or an unwillingness to contribute to society.
Yeah.
They misattribute that to not contributing to society. Right?
Yes.
Because you are not wholly focused on the act of making a dollar, you're not
Yeah.
doing anything. It's
And-
like you can, like, arguably, okay, cool. We live in a society where we still have to somehow obtain money in order to participate in the broader system of transactions that exist right now, the way that everything's structured. But there are plenty of people working towards a number of idealistic opportunities, right, across the country, across the world, all centered right here at home, and they do it because that's what it takes to create this place where you actually want to exist.
Yeah. That, I mean, I remember this thought striking me during when we were working on all this, and that's like, people say, well, if money wasn't a motivator, nothing would get done. But in fact, I think it's like if you have to pay somebody to do it, it's probably not worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that all the things that are really, really essential for our lives, people are going to do. They're going to do because they want to do them, because they care about people or they care about themselves and others. And, and then also there's the case of a lot of damage that happens, though, where people's ability to prioritize is messed up. But there's an interesting, like, feminist point to make about a lot of this, because classically, the labor of, like, the reproduction of the household and stuff, right, is unwaged labor, right, but is relegated to the realm of women who are, like, marginalized from the labor market. And, that there's all of these, the work of care, we could say, right? And I'm not just talking about the institutionalized form of that, but the emotional labor, the labor of child rearing, to say nothing of giving birth, but of child rearing, that all of these things are, like, in fact, the most important. These are the baseline. This is the baseline of human life. This is what sustains and makes anything else possible. And but it's also the condition of the money system, the wage system, right? That money happens kind of on top of that realm of unpaid labor. But as we create a world in which money becomes and the wage and money becomes the focus of everything, then all of those other forms of labor suffer, right? All of those things that people would do whether people were paying them or not. But now all of our time and attention gets structured around calculation and measurement and time being money. And that's just a recipe for, this other kind of crisis, right? The social crisis, the crisis of like the spiritual crisis, and the fracturing of communities. And so what, we can be depressed about that, and we are, right? That's why we're depressed. But the question is, what do we do about it? And so when we talk about, well, one, like all of these things, like I'm critical of money or whatever, but I'm not trying to say we should, like, stop using money in Carbondale. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that we should use money to pay people to build the things that we need that make us just a little bit less reliant on it, and not wholly, right? But just to create some space where it's like, another value.
The social deflation of the value of currency.
Yeah, just the push back a little bit of it. And so what we want for the Food Autonomy Project is we want to work with the city, as a nonprofit organization that can get grants from the city in order to pay people for this incredibly valuable work of building beautiful spaces of producing food. And to have those people also train neighbors and people around those gardens to work in those gardens and teach them about, if they need to be taught about cooking or preparing, but also to learn from them, because many of them know lots of wonderful things about that, right? So but to try to stitch together those fabrics around food as something that is, that has a lot to teach us about the earth and about our bodies and about community. And so we should use money to rebuild those networks and those spaces. And then also on the care work side, part of our care work proposal was not just an emergency crisis response team, which is urgently important, and I know that's an idea that lots of people agree with, and there's really good models out there too, but also to have workers whose job it is to reach out to neighbors when there's not an emergency, and invite neighbors to different trainings around how to de-escalate situations, how to spread the knowledge that we want these care workers to have among neighbors, and how to create what we'd call like neighborhood networks, where, maybe instead of calling the care workers, right, or you could call the care workers, instead of dispatching some professional, they've got a list of other neighbors who have skills and time and can put you in direct contact with them, right? Because part of the problem, again, with this situation of the social crisis that we're in is isolation and loneliness, and people being on their own with problems that just anybody with some time could solve for them. One of the stories that sticks out from an earlier meeting of this is someone talking about how an elderly person in Carbondale, how they sat alone in their house for 4 days because they couldn't reach the light bulb and didn't have anybody to call. And it wasn't until there was a wellness check from the agency that this person worked with that they realized that they're just sitting in the dark, and so we can try to we should invest in solving these problems of that are really the problems of the quality of our lives, right? The quality of our life isn't going to be solved by putting new freaking lampposts in, like all of these ideas of quality of life or something just get twisted and taken to mean just superficial stuff. But we have deep challenges, and we have to actually seriously, collectively think about how to take these deep challenges on, because no one is going to do it for us, and things are just going to get worse. That's it. It's just going to get worse unless we do something.
Is that where you want to end the podcast?
Sure.
That is episode number 36.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I feel like I could talk for. I feel like I want to keep talking for 2 more hours, just because I don't feel like I said all the things I need to say.
I feel like I'll just put you in a box. I'll put a stuffed animal up here, and you can just talk.
Yeah. How long
let
was
it
that?
all out. But no, man. This is. You put a lot of thought into action.
Yeah. I try.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like that you have to think about what are the next 5 other things that occur in this sequence so that I can play through that. And then what am I prepared to be out of sequence in this plan that I have, and then redirect back into the greater trajectory. This is just part of it, man. And the reason why you can, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk to lots of people about a continuation of this, right, in the coming months, is that you play through these things, and you have to. And sometimes you can start at one point that's in the middle of it and circle back around to it. It's not always point A, point B, point C, and like this linear excursion that you go on. It's like this all is connected, and I can start the conversation at any point, and I will find myself back at that point, having addressed 8 other points along the way. That's the reality.
All interrelated, man. Are we done here? Then
yeah. No, you're good. You're good. It's first WTF Carbondale belt buckle shot for episode 36 with Nick Smaligo. Yeah, it was just no, you're awesome. Okay. I didn't even ask him about his hats. Yeah. But he can tell the story of the hat elsewhere. It's good to be back in the seat talking to folks. Even if I can't do halfway worthwhile talking, I'll get the rust knocked off. We'll get back to it. Again, this was the first in a series of interviews I'm trying to do with all of the 2021 Carbondale City Council candidates because they are all interesting people that all contribute to this community in some way, shape, or form. And it's worth telling these stories for you to hear. And so I appreciate you listening and see if we can stick the landing on the tagline. Again, have a good one, whatever that one may be.